Over 24 years before its sequel, in May 2000, Sir Ridley Scott's Gladiator hit cinemas, becoming a worldwide phenomenon and making superstars out of, until then, lesser-known actors Russell Crowe and Joaquin Phoenix. Crowe himself tells a story of innocently walking through the streets of Rome doing some shopping, only to find the streets around the Spanish Steps thronged with people. Nothing too strange there, but the side streets were similarly packed, so he asked a policeman what was going on. The reply, "You il gladiatore, you are what is going on." And with that, a large part of the crowd, like the Roman crowd in the Colosseum in the film, began chanting, "Massimo, Massimo, Massimo." Dare I say that some of us here today would not be had it not been for that movie. Personally, while I had already started my A-level in ancient history by the summer of 2000, I might not have looked to dive headfirst into ancient history at university without the release of Gladiator. David Franzoni's screenplay was inspired by his travels around Europe and the Near East, where he saw numerous arenas, read parts of the Historia Augusta. He seems to have become intrigued by the historical murder of Commodus by Narcissus, and consumed Daniel P. Mannix's 1958 book, Those Who Are About to Die, which has also inspired the recent TV show of the same name, starring Anthony Hopkins as Vespasian. There is also a story of two producers at DreamWorks Studios, Walter F. Parks and Douglas Wick, and about how they got Ridley Scott on board to direct Franzoni's screenplay before it was anywhere near finished, by showing him this. Jean-Léon Guillaume's Pollice Verso, a picture that Scott repeatedly said captures the Roman Empire in all its glory and wickedness. Parks and Wick were so taken aback by Scott's enthusiasm that they could not help but point out that the esteemed director did not know anything about the proposed story. "I don't care, I'll do it," was their supposed response. The rest is ancient history, or at least some of it was. Perhaps due to its very success, grossing over $500 million worldwide, Gladiator came under scrutiny for its lack of historical accuracy. Indeed, at least one historical consultant quit the movie due to its lack of historical accuracy, while another asked for their name to be removed from the credits. The non-fiction book-writing historian in me sympathises, but another part of me wants to tell such people, consultants and cynical viewers, to just wise up and enjoy the film. Gladiator never claims to be a telling of historical events. Rather, it is merely inspired by them, and it is some of those historical inspirations for characters in the film that we're going to look at today.
My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the armies of the North, general of the Felix Legions, loyal servant to the true Emperor Marcus Aurelius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance, in this life or the next.
We begin with the star of the show, who provides us with a short but nonetheless dramatic outline of who he is and and what he is now after. You may all know, or at least surmise, that there was no historical Maximus, no general turned slave turned gladiator who fought and killed an emperor in the Colosseum. But there were historical inspirations. Certainly Maximus' story has aspects of the 1st century BC Spartacus, another soldier in service to Rome who ended up a gladiator fighting for his freedom. But this does not cover the high-level position of the Roman hierarchy that Maximus fell from upon the ahistorical murder of Marcus Aurelius. For that, we have some inspiration in the form of Publius Helvius Pertinax, the man who succeeded Commodus in 192. Of low origins, the Italian son of a freedman, Pertinax had led a more normal career than an enslaved general turned gladiator. Rising through the ranks and serving across the empire, Parthia, Britain, Danube, Germany, his good service saw him hold various governorships, Dacia, Moesia, Syria, Britain and Africa, and the consulship twice. At the time of Commodus' murder, Pertinax was urban prefect, making him a candidate for power, one the Praetorian Guard accepted, elevating Pertinax to emperor on the first days of 193. He made some attempts to overturn the excesses of Commodus and return to the restraint of Marcus Aurelius, something that Maximus was charged with by his imperial mentor, although not the restoration of the public. Pertinax's attempts proved short-lived, as he would be assassinated after just 3 months by a recalcitrant Praetorian guard, who did not like being told to actually do some work. It seems Maximus's hopes were also to be in vain, given that the Severan dynasty, which ruled after Pertinax, is in power in Gladiator 2, in the guise of the brothers Caracalla and Geta. There is another historical figure who might have inspired aspects of the character of Maximus, Marcus Nonius Macrinus, a prominent senator and general who served under the emperors Antoninus Pius, Lucius Verus, and Marcus Aurelius. Like Maximus, he did serve against the Germanic invaders along the Danube, the Quadi and the Marcomanni, and like Maximus, Macrinus rose to high military office, serving as an imperial legate in Pannonia Inferior between 152 and 154, and then in Pannonia Superior from 159 to 162. They both received high office for their service. Maximus was to be appointed imperial caretaker for a transition back to a republic. Might we suggest that Maximus was actually to be invested with imperial power to achieve Marcus Aurelius' republican objectives? Might he have been able to give up power, even if he showed reluctance to have it in the first place? Macrinus received no such imperial elevation, but he did receive a suffect consulship alongside Paetus from the 1st of April to the 30th of June 154, a date that marks it as a reward from Antoninus Pius rather than Marcus Aurelius. But Macrinus did become a close advisor and friend to Marcus Aurelius as well. This was not just seen in his continuation of Macrinus' legateship in Pannonia Superior, inherited from the previous imperial regime, or as appointing him Macrinus as proconsul of Asia Province in 170 and 171, reflected in a Greek inscription found in Ephesus, but perhaps more personally, Macrinus was chosen as the chief priest of the cult of the divine Verus, set up upon the untimely death in 169 of Lucius Verus, co-emperor and adoptive brother of Marcus Aurelius, husband of Lucilla and father to Lucius Verus Jr., both in the real world and in Gladiator. The similarities are limited though. Macrinus was a prominent senator from near Brixia, modern Brescia, in northern Italy, where his villa on the shore of Lake Garda has been uncovered, rather than Maximus's Spain, and there is no hint that Macrinus lived through any serious undermining of his status. While we are not told so, it is inferred that Maximus's wife was also Spanish. Inscriptions seem to record that Macrinus's wife was called Aria, and therefore probably from the Etruscan Ari tribe. Though some inscriptions may seem to mention another family relative, Flavia or Manila, the mother, sister or daughter of Macrinus, there might also have been a son who set up Macrinus' tomb, but this is doubtful. As a final aside on Macrinus, before moving on, as well as his Brescian villa and several inscriptions, in 2008 Macrinus' tomb was found on the banks of the Tiber near the Via Flaminia, about 8.5 kilometres from the walls of Rome. As can be imagined, this sparked many a newspaper article about how the tomb of the realised gladiator had been uncovered. Unfortunately, this media attention and column inches did not translate into euros on preservation. In 2012, the tomb had to be reburied to protect the fragile marble due to a lack of funding. There was another commander from the reign of Marcus Aurelius, though, who could have provided inspiration for the character and possibly the name of Maximus. This is Marcus Valerius Maximianus. Born in Portivio, which is in modern Slovenia, the career of Maximianus is only known from inscriptions, as he did not appear in the written record. But even from these scant remarks, he was a significant military figure during the reigns of Marcus Aurelius and Commodus. We first find him commanding sections of the Roman fleet, providing crossings of the Danube for the Pannonian armies, a role that would not just have been given to anyone, so there is much more likely that he had a long career even before this. He's also given charge of sections of Marcus Aurelius' cavalry during the First Marcomanni War, during which he killed Vao, chief of the Naristi, possibly in single combat. He was trusted enough to be given a role in the expedition to Syria to quell the rebellion of Avidius Cassius, and then to be made procurator of Moesia, where he defeated various groups of bandits. His success and loyalty saw Maximianus appointed to a series of legionary commands, the highlight of which, and the point to which he comes closest to the fictional Maximus, was his victory over the Quadi at Lagarico in 179, which was seen as the last battle of the Second Marcomannic War. This achievement saw members of his legion at the time, the Second Adriatics, dedicate this victory inscription in his name to the emperors Marcus Aurelius and Commodus. To the victory of the emperors, dedicated by 855 soldiers of the 2nd Legion of the army stationed at Lagariccio, made to order by Marcus Valerius Maximianus, legate of the 2nd Adriatic Legion. Departing sharply from Maximus, though, Maximianus retained the confidence of Commodus, giving good service to the new emperor in Sarmatia, which was rewarded with the governorship of Numidia, the source of another inscription, and then appointed to the Sufic consulship in 186. There is no record of when he died, so it is at least possible that he did fall foul of Commodus's increasingly erratic behaviour, but this is mere speculation. Before we get on to the next, and indeed first real person from Gladiator, I have a quick question for you all. How many times in the first 200 years of Roman imperial leadership was the father succeeded on the throne by his natural son? As the most powerful state of the day, you might expect that the Romans had a secure enough government to allow for such dynastic succession. Of course, there needs to be the added element of luck of having sons be born at all, and then survive to succeed their fathers. And this is where the Roman Empire fell foul of the gods. In a quick breakdown of imperial succession, due to a lack of sons, the Julio-Claudian dynasty saw Augustus succeeded by his stepson Tiberius, who was succeeded by his great-nephew Caligula, who was succeeded by his uncle Claudius, who was succeeded by his great-nephew / stepson / son-in-law Nero. Then we have a trio of non-dynastic emperors, Galba, Otho, Vitellius, before the general Vespasian became emperor in AD 69, and when he died a decade later, he was succeeded by his eldest son, Titus. Yay! The first son to succeed his father in a century of the dynastic imperial rule. But this did not burst a dam. Indeed, the gap to the next imperial son to succeed his father was essentially the same again, a full century. Titus was succeeded by his brother Domitian, who was succeeded by a senator of no familial connection, Nerva, setting off a series of adoptive emperors of no family ties: Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, Marcus Aurelius, and Lucius Verus. This successful line of good/adoptive emperors was only broken in AD 180, when Marcus Aurelius was succeeded by his natural son, Lucius Aelius Aurelius Commodus. Commodus was not only just the second man to succeed his father on the Roman imperial throne, but he was also actually the first son born during his father's reign to succeed his father's throne. Such a life of imperial trappings and luxury may well have made Commodus not a moral man, as Richard Harris's Marcus Aurelius confesses to Maximus in Gladiator. There are many things altered by Gladiator with regard to Commodus. Despite his poor reputation, there is no suggestion in the historical sources that he murdered his father, who died either of long-standing illness or plague. Commodus also ruled significantly longer than the movie might intimate. He had already been co-emperor with his father from 177 and would rule alone until the last day of 192. 12 years of sole rule against what appears to be little more than mere weeks or months in Gladiator. In making his own sister the object of Commodus's affections and desires, Gladiator overlooks how the emperor was in fact married to Brutia Crispina, a daughter of a prominent senatorial family that held several consulships during the reigns of Marcus Aurelius and Commodus. However, despite lasting a decade, this marriage produced no children, which likely contributed to Brutia being accused of adultery and banished to Capri in 188, where she was later executed. Coincidentally, Brutia's demise has been occasionally and wrongly associated, through a misreading of the Historia Augusta and Dio, with that of Lucilla, who we will see predeceased Brutia by up to 7 years, and for seemingly different reasons. However, for all those deviations and more, there are some perhaps surprising things about Commodus that Gladiator gets right. Most infamous were Commodus's escapades in the Colosseum. Not only had he taken to appearing in public dressed as Hercules, Commodus had made himself the central attraction in numerous gladiatorial shows, and not just because he was hosting the games or blessing them with his presence. He actually gave a series of rather impressive, albeit excessive, displays of marksmanship, killing hundreds of exotic animals with his bow: deer, lions, leopards, elephants, ostriches, giraffes, panthers, and rhinos. Had he stopped there, the real-life Commodus would have reflected what Derek Jacobi's Senator Gracchus said about Gladiator Commodus.
I think he knows what Rome is. Rome is the mob. Conjure magic for them and they'll be distracted. We take away their freedom and still they'll roar. The beating heart of Rome is not the marble of the Senate, it's the sand of the Colosseum. You bring them death, and they will love him for it. I think he knows.
Bread and circuses indeed. This was reflected by Herodian, History 1:15. Even if his conduct was hardly becoming of an emperor, he did win the approval of the mob for his courage and his marksmanship. However, Commodus did not stop there. But when he came into the amphitheatre naked, took up arms, and fought as a gladiator, the people saw a disgraceful spectacle. A nobly born emperor of the Romans, whose fathers and forebears had won many victories, not taking the field against barbarians or opponents worthy of the Romans, but disgracing his high position by degrading and disgusting exhibitions. In his gladiatorial contests, he defeated his opponents with ease, and he did no more than wound them, since they all submitted to him, but only because they knew he was the emperor, not because he was truly a gladiator. To make matters worse, for every appearance in the Colosseum, Commodus made the city of Rome pay him 1 million sesterces, putting further strain on an economy already struggling because of his extravagance. In terms of actual ability, Gladiator does present Commodus as having some skill with the blade, when he is seen training early in the movie against numerous opponents. However, this, much like his real-life gladiatorial fights, would prove to be mostly style over substance. In a way, both Gladiator Commodus and real-life Commodus were something of a professional wrestler. Undoubtedly skilled, but their contests are choreographed, their victory predetermined. This is until both come face to face with an opponent playing for keeps. In the film, Commodus's choreographed swordplay is no match for the battle-hardened Maximus, even when he is mortally wounded. And in reality, the plot that brought about Commodus's death ultimately saw the emperor's wrestling partner, Narcissus, fight Commodus hand to hand, strangling him in the bath. It must be said that while his public displays of gladiator fighting did not help Commodus's reputation with those who cared about disgracing the position of princeps, who were also the strata of society who would compose the written histories, they did not directly lead to his death, as Gladiator depicts. Joaquin Phoenix did harness some of the instability of Commodus, adding that he felt he was something of an unloved son, shown during the conversation with Marcus Aurelius over the succession, that culminates in not only Marcus admitting that any of Commodus's failures as a son are his failures as a father, but an imperial murder too. However, the real Commodus was even more unhinged, and to see that and the reasons behind his assassination requires a brief outline of Commodus's entire reign. What started out as an overt, extravagant, and even violent rejection of the austere stoicism of his father led Commodus down a path of increasingly arbitrary and capricious behaviour. He also had little interest in actually running the empire, leaving it to a series of favourites, Sautyrus, Perennius, and Cleander. In order to pay for his favour-winning army donatives, an enormous entertainment bill, a heavy tax on the upper classes was introduced. Unsurprisingly, this raised opposition amongst them, while also undermining the Roman economy. These initial steps in the reduction of the Roman Empire from a kingdom of gold to one of iron and rust helped spark a palace plot within 2 years of his accession. We will look at the details of this plot of 182 when we come to another character in Gladiator, but to be targeted by some of those closest to him, and for a man he trusted in Sautyrus to be murdered, greatly affected Commodus. He withdrew further from public life and administration, leaving the run of the empire in the hands of the unscrupulous Cleander. This hands-off approach and corruption of Cleander led to more threats to Commodus's reign, court plots, conspiracies, and usurpations. Eventually, a grain shortage provided the opportunity for his opponents to remove Cleander in 190, but this led to Commodus taking more of the reins of power, and he quickly descended into megalomania, claiming that he was the son of Jupiter and covering the city with his statues. During 191, a fire destroyed many public buildings in Rome, and Commodus took this opportunity to declare himself the new Romulus, renaming the city Colonia Lucia Annia Comediana after himself. This led to a series of renaming of other things. The months of the year were named after the 12 parts of his official title: Lucius, Aulus, Aurelius, Commodus, Augustus, Herculius, Romanus Exarpitarius, Amazonius, Invictus, Felix, Pius. Legions were to be called Commodianae. The African grain fleet was to be called the Alexandria Commodiana Tregata. The Senate was to become the Senatus Commodiata Fortunata. The imperial palace was to be the Commodianus. The Roman people themselves were to be known as the Commodiani. By presenting himself as the divine being responsible for every aspect of Roman life and society, Commodus gave those around him little choice. It was either assassination or some form of revolt, particularly when those around him found their names on his latest execution list. The ultimately successful plot focused on the emperor's mistress, Marcia, his chamberlain, Eclectus, and the Praetorian prefect, Quintus Aelius Laelius. More on him later. Their chosen means was poison, but when that failed, they sent Marcus to finish the job. Commodus's memory was damned as a public enemy. Most of his actions were overturned, and many of his statues toppled. However, given the popularity of Marcus Aurelius and Commodus himself with certain parts of the army and the mob, Septimius Severus found it politically expedient to rehabilitate Commodus's memory, even to force the Senate to deify him in 195. He may not appear for too long in Gladiator, but Marcus Aurelius is around enough to greatly affect the story. Despite his reputation as an enlightened philosopher king in real life, Marcus Aurelius gave no hint at wanting to restore the Republic, even as the depths of Commodus's lack of morals became all the more clear. Indeed, the imperial propaganda would have it that the Roman Empire was still a republic, with the emperor merely a guiding first among equals, rather than an all-powerful military dictator. This was nonsense, of course, and would be revealed all the more clearly in the aftermath of Commodus's assassination. We might even suggest that part of the story of Gladiator, specifically Marcus's proposed succession plan and his subsequent murder, are attempts to explain why such a well-respected, deep-thinking emperor would allow his empire to pass to such a monster in Commodus. We might find some of the actual reason in Marcus Aurelius' family. In focusing on Commodus and Lucilla, Gladiator greatly underestimates the number of children Marcus Aurelius had. During his 30-year marriage to Faustina the Younger, daughter of Antoninus Pius, Marcus Aurelius had no less than 15 children. Domitia Faustina, who died while still a child, a set of fraternal twins, Titus Aelius Antonius and Titus Aelius Aurelius, who perished in their early days, perhaps another set of twins, Gemellus Luciliae, who, if they existed, died as an infant, and Lucilla, Aurelia Faustina, Tiberius Aelius Antoninus, who died while still a child, an unknown child who died before 158, Fadilla, Faustina Minor, another set of twins, the elder of whom, Titus Aurelius Fulvus Antonius, perished while still a child, while the younger twin was Commodus himself. Marcus Annius Verus Caesar, who was appointed co-heir with Commodus, only to die aged 7 due to complications in removing a tumour under his ear. Hadrianus, of a certain date, but likely another infant death, and Vibia Aurelia of Sabina. An important aspect of the relationship between Marcus and Faustina is not only that they were husband and wife, they were also first cousins through Faustina's mother, Faustina the Elder. They shared a grandfather in Marcus Annius Verus. Indeed, to go a step further, technically, through Marcus's adoption by Antoninus Pius, they were brother and sister. This closeness in blood could help explain the failure of many of their children to survive to adulthood, and possibly also partially explain Commodus's instability. Indeed, of those 15 children, only 5 outlived their father: Commodus, Lucilla, Fadilla, Faustina Minor, and Sabina. Aurelia Faustina might have 2, and yet only 2 of these feature in Gladiator. The loss of so many male heirs may also have increased the pressure put on Commodus, pressure he did not thrive under. Indeed, the extent to which Commodus turned away from his father's teachings could detail not just a lack of belief in them, but even a complete rejection of and rebellion against everything Marcus Aurelius stood for, due to a personal bitterness towards his father. There is something of a discrepancy in the age of Marcus's depiction. When he died in AD 180, Marcus Aurelius was only 58, while Richard Harris was 70 upon the release of Gladiator in 2000, although the weariness of Harris's portrayal could reflect the paucity of health and the amount of fighting Marcus Aurelius had to undertake during the Marcomannic Wars of 166 to 180. Another potential depiction of the enlightened Marcus Aurelius in Gladiator could be how, through the pronouncement of Oliver Reed's Proximo, he banned gladiatorial games in Rome. This is not accurate, although Marcus did ban such games in Antioch specifically. The one other child of Marcus Aurelius besides Commodus to appear in Gladiator, played by Colin Nielsen, was Lucilla. As the eldest child of Marcus and Faustina to survive to adulthood, Lucilla was an important dynastic tool for the imperial family. As depicted by Gladiator, Lucilla was married to Marcus Aurelius' co-emperor, Lucius Verus. In real life, she was about 11 at the time of the betrothal, with the marriage taking place 3 years later. Verus was 18 years her senior. By the time Lucius Verus Sr. died, likely of plague in 169, the marriage had produced 3 children: Aurelia Lucilla, Lucilla Plautia, and Lucius Verus Jr. But unlike the film, Lucilla was almost immediately remarried, with her second husband being Tiberius Claudius Pompeianus, a politician and general of Marcus Aurelius, a match that could also have been some inspiration for the relationship between Lucilla and Maximus in Gladiator. It also saw Lucilla give birth to another son, Lucius Aurelius Commodus Pompeianus. The movie also follows her prominent position at court, although it has a slight difference of her being the mother of Lucius Verus' heir, something that we will address separately. With both Gladiator Lucilla and real-life Lucilla enjoying her high status, she is said to have accompanied Marcus Aurelius on more than one of his Marcomannic campaigns, including the one that culminated in Marcus's death, an outline followed by the film. Was she formidable enough for Marcus Aurelius to bemoan her being born a woman?
If only you had been born a man, what a Caesar you would have made.
Father.
You would have been strong. I wonder, would you have been just?
I would have been what you told me to be.
What a Caesar you would have made. It might seem like a compliment from where we sit, but the Romans themselves would not have taken it as such, even if it could hint at Marcus's worry over Commodus. It meant Lucilla was acting beyond her defined role in Roman society, and women acting in Roman politics was considered a poor reflection of the men running the state, and on the state of government as a whole. Such acting beyond her station and enjoyment of her high status became more acute upon the accession of Commodus. This should have seen Lucilla retire to private life, but she refused and came to hate Commodus's wife Brutia as a woman who had usurped her imperial position at court, however legitimately. There were also suggestions that Lucilla became concerned with Commodus's erratic behaviour, but this seems a little like with the benefit of hindsight. Was Commodus really so out of control in the first 2 years of his reign, or was it more that Lucilla did not like her own loss of influence, along with Commodus's rejection of the governing style of their father? Whatever her real motives, Lucilla became the centre of a plot to murder Commodus in 182, along with the Praetorian prefect Publius Taurentius Paternus, her daughter Plautius, her cousin Marcus Ummidius Quadratus Anniamus, and Ummidia Cornificia Faustia, and a nephew of her husband Quintianus. But the aim was to perhaps replace him with Lucilla, and her husband might highlight what her true motive was: personal power and influence. The plot failed because the chosen assassin, Quintianus, decided to add a flamboyant boast. Here is what the Senate sends you, rather than deliver the fatal blade thrust immediately. That moment's delay allowed Commodus's guards to overpower and disarm the would-be assassin. Quintianus, Paternus, and Annianus were all executed, but rather than be chained up as his incestuous broodmare, as threatened in the film, the real Commodus had his treacherous sister exiled to the island of Capri, where she was joined by Plautia and Numidia. Before the end of 182, Commodus could not abide the continued survival of such a treacherous cabal. Perhaps they were the focal point of dislike for his rule in Rome, and so sent a centurion to Capri to kill all 3 women. This shows that while Lucilla was a real person, her survival to witness the demise of Commodus in Gladiator makes the movie version something of an amalgamation of several women in Commodus's life. The actual Lucilla, Commodus's wife Brutia Crispina, and Commodus's mistress Marcia, who was part of the plot that saw to Commodus's assassination. In terms of age, Connie Nielsen was 35 when playing Lucilla, a similar age to when she died in 182. Although Gladiator takes in the end of Commodus's reign, which was in 192. While Joaquin Phoenix was 25 when playing Commodus, a fairly accurate age difference between Lucilla and Commodus. Plautia may have perished along with her mother and Capri, but that leaves two other offspring from Lucilla's marriage to Lucius Verus for us to look at too. Certainly Gladiator has it that Lucius Verus Jr., played by Spencer Treat Clark, outlived his father, his grandfather, Marcus Aurelius, his uncle Commodus, and his hero Maximus, except none of this is true. Aurelia Lucilla and Lucius Verus Jr. died young, both possibly before their father in early 169. This means that the character in Gladiator, Commodus's nephew and heir to the throne, and I hope this is not too big a spoiler for anyone, the main character played by Paul Mescal in Gladiator 2 has no historical basis beyond his initial existence and parentage. We come now to perhaps the one character who could have done with more screen time development in Gladiator, given his role in the story and the historical background and individuals.
They say no.
People should know when they're conquered.
Would you, Quintus? Would I?
I'm speaking specifically here of Quintus. Following the Battle of Vindobona, the celebrations and the upheaval surrounding Marcus Aurelius' succession plan and subsequent murder, it is inferred, although not said, that Quintus's loyalty was bought by Commodus through promotion to the prefect of the Praetorian Guard. Despite this prominent act of betrayal and promotion, we hear virtually nothing of Quintus, with him largely fading into the background as a reminder of the corruption of power. Given how his turning against Maximus sparks the events of the film, and then turning against Commodus during the final showdown with Maximus in the Colosseum facilitates the death of the Emperor, more could have been made of Quintus. There were some deleted scenes that depict Quintus's growing uncomfortableness with the situation of Commodus's reign, unease at his treatment of the Praetorians who failed to report that Maximus could have survived, and trying to justify his obeying of Commodus to Maximus. But there could have been so much more. Unease of his treatment of Lucilla, worry over some of the Emperor's plans towards enemies, actual and perceived, thinly veiled threats to his own life, or a confident comment over the true nature of Marcus Aurelius' death.
Quintus, sword! Give me your sword!
Give me a sword!
Sheathe your sword! Sheathe your sword!
A more cynical view would be that Commodus has lost the crowd here in the face of Maximus's triumphs, making his overthrow inevitable. As the Praetorian Prefect, Quintus was the best placed to benefit from the end of one reign and the beginning of a new one, possibly even his own, or being involved in the regency of Lucius Verus Jr. In such a view, Quintus's order that his fellow Praetorians sheathe their swords in the face of Commodus's demand for a replacement weapon was not some last-minute reigniting of his friendship with Maximus, or some respect for the sacred sands of the Colosseum, but an ambitious man seizing his opportunity to rid himself of an unstable emperor, using his former commander as a blunt object. This latter most cynical power grab would seem the most in keeping with the historical individual that this Quintus was based on, or at least could have been based on, the Praetorian Prefect in the last part of Commodus's reign, Quintus Aemilius Laetus. His predecessor as prefect, Lucius Julius Velleius Gratus Julianus, had been the target of ridicule by Commodus. At one point, the emperor reputedly pushed Julianus fully clothed into a swimming pool and made him dance naked before his concubines, clashing cymbals and making grimaces. He eventually had Julianus executed on some undoubtedly spurious charge, or we might suggest that Julianus had had enough and was actually plotting against the emperor. On such a backdrop, Quintus Aemilius Laetus could be forgiven for looking for some way to facilitate Commodus's demise, particularly if he had been the target of similar ridicule and humiliations as his predecessor. Laetus would have known where those ended. We can also attribute the potential for similar cynical political opportunism to Laetus, as we did with Quintus. Self-preservation and power are quite the cocktail to incite action. As it was, Laetus was a prominent player in the conspiracy that saw Commodus murdered on the last day of 192. As the most powerful individual of the conspiracy, it was on Laetus to promote their candidate for the throne, the aforementioned Pertinax. However, Laetus failed to foster support from the rest of the Praetorian Guard, which meant Pertinax had to resort to the usual promise of a vast donative, a promise he could not keep. This earned Pertinax the growing enmity of the Praetorians, leading to Laetus abandoning the emperor to his inevitable bloody fate. Laetus is not mentioned in the accounts of Herodian, Cassius Dio, or the Historia Augusta on the sale of the empire, where the Praetorians held what was effectively a public auction at their camp, an auction won by Didius Julianus, who the guardsmen then acclaimed emperor. There are two other men recorded as Praetorian Prefect under Didius Julianus, Titus Fulvius Genialis and Tullius Crispinus, so it appears that Laetus lost his job upon the assassination of Pertinax, but did not immediately lose his life. But within 2 months, with the forces of Septimius Severus bearing down on Rome, Julianus felt the need for a placatory move in executing those involved in the assassination of Commodus, which included Laetus. Although the Historia Augusta suggests it was because Julianus feared Laetus would betray him to Severus rather than almost the other way around. Might Quintus have led a similar existence and faced a similar fate in the 20 years since Maximus killed Commodus in the Colosseum? We may find out. And with that speculation, I shall end off. We could have tried to find any historical parallels of the senators allied against or with Commodus. We have Senator Gracchus and Gaius and Falco. We could have looked into the names used in Gladiator for the supporting cast: Juba, Cicero, Cassius. We could have looked at who the German leader was, which is something I might do somewhere else. We also could have looked at some of the real people in the characters in Gladiator 2, with Caracalla, Geta, and other Macrinus. But those are all best left for another time, when we actually have seen and digested that film.